ideally, you have 16 teams in the playoffs. Ideally. And we do still have 16 teams in the playoffs, but the appearances we're going to have 24. And the reason that I still say, well, it's still technically going to be 16 is because when they get to the official playoffs, it'll be 16 teams. Now, the only teams that we know of that are out are Buffalo, New Jersey, Ottawa, Detroit, LA, San Jose, and Anaheim down here. So California's out. These teams are out. And of course, there are fans of Buffalo and New Jersey that say, wait a minute, we had games in hand, and if we'd won both of them, we would have caught Montreal. Yep. The problem is that argument can be made about a lot of teams in these situations. The concept of having a tournament to decide the top seed in this setup, they haven't decided on how they're going to work that yet. So for teams with a bye, they're saying, well, wait a minute, we're not going to be playing anything important. These guys are going to do the play-in round. They're going to be up to speed with playoff hockey. And then what? Well, nothing's decided as of yet, right? Other than 24 teams are going to compete. So whether we see Montreal, if Montreal were to beat Pittsburgh, which I don't think they do, we'll get into that. Whether we would see them play Philadelphia in the next round or Boston, it may very well not just be that these 4 seeds are going to be in order of where they finish during the regular season. We may see a tournament between these teams to decide who the actual number 1 seed is. And this might be a year where the President's Trophy is suspended. Where they say, you know what, President's Trophy, no. Unless we declare, well, yeah, with the regular season done. Because that's the thing, for fans of Buffalo, New Jersey in particular, the only way to make it so that it would be fair is winning percentage, in which case Montreal knocks out Buffalo, New Jersey, or have them play those games and see whether or not they would have caught Montreal. Well, how is that decided? Because then you can go strength of schedule, and, well, which teams would they have to play, and, well, what about those teams, and did they just play each other, and does that doesn't make it fair for Montreal. If Buffalo were to defeat New Jersey twice and get into that makes it not fair for Montreal at all. Montreal doesn't get a shot at beating New Jersey twice. So there has to be a cutoff, and that's where we're at. And then what that means too is that for teams like Pittsburgh and Edmonton, you could potentially see them lose a play-in round and end up out. Now, I don't think that happens. I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is all these teams are going to be healthy, which should favor the higher seeds. Should. Where it's a problem is Toronto and Columbus. Columbus was playing very, very well, and then the injuries really caught up to them. Basically, if Seth Jones were good to go against the Toronto Maple Leafs, it would be tough not to take Columbus. Now, for people who get mad about how this isn't right and everybody's making it and this is ridiculous, in the 1980s, 76.2% of teams made the playoffs. I'm talking the round of 16. And right now, 77.4% of the league is involved in this tournament to decide who is going to end up finishing where and who's going to get to play in that 16-team tournament. So it's a 1.2% difference. You guys would have hated the 80s. Man, everybody who's too young to remember would have hated that then, right? Where 16 out of 21 teams made it. Basically, if you missed the playoffs, it was shame. It was terrible, especially if in the Norris. Some years you had to be below 59 points to miss. Sometimes it was the Smythe where you had that. Sometimes the Adams had a weak run. The Patrick was pretty good because there were 6 teams in it. So it was harder to find a year where the Patrick division was kind of sad. And yet somehow we survived. Now, the idea that these teams with the play-in will have an easier time, and I've seen that too, like, well, they can just go on a run. You have to win 19 games if you're coming out of this round, at least in all likelihood. I'm not going to do a full bracket because we don't know what it's going to look like. I can't do a full bracket. We have no idea who's going to end up playing who and where this is going to end up. I still like Tampa. I still think Tampa has a good chance. I think with all of this layoff, I think it could help Tampa Bay Lightning. Last year in the first round of the playoffs, they took Columbus lightly. They played well in the first period of Game 1, and they played well in Game 3 of Game 4. Or Period 3 of Game 4. If they'd played that way through those 4 games, they would have won themselves a couple of games. At least 2 of those games they would have won. If they'd played that way the whole series. The reality is, they thought they were going to cruise. And when they realized they could go home, they started to play. I don't think Tampa Bay would have that problem being motivated, even with a bye. And again, a bye just means a bye into the playoffs. It's not a guarantee of seeding. Now, I've talked about how the NHL can kind of reinvent themselves coming out of this. And they could. The NHL could make it so that there is a bye in the first round. The NHL could make it where there is a wild card play-in. I know that one thing that was being talked about before we settled on 24 teams is that it might be 20 that are playing, which would have ruled out Montreal and New York here, and would have ruled out Chicago and Arizona here. And it would have put Edmonton and Nashville straight in, and it would have put Pittsburgh and Carolina straight in. I think part of the reason why they didn't end up going in that route is because there were just teams that were in a seeding that would they have stayed in that seeding? Would they have stayed there if we'd played the full 82? We just don't know. We'll never know what might have happened with a full 82-game schedule. We have to throw that away. So, I mean, in reality, if the NHL were actually a league that didn't care about player safety and wanted to just cruise through and roll along, we wouldn't have shut down. We would have just kept playing. And that's not what happened. So, this play-in round that likely will be in July at the earliest, and might be mid to late July when this takes place. Again, we're going into phase 2 as the hope next week. Next week is where they're hoping they hit phase 2. And then this would be, where they're finally playing games. So in between next week and around the end of July, that's a lot of time to get in shape and to have exhibition games and to have some system figured out. Because in between phase 2 and phase 3, they can better lock down exactly what they're going to do. So when we look at the individual matchups, Pittsburgh and Montreal, I like Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to have Gensel back, and I don't see Montreal beating him in a best of 5. Carolina, New York. New York's own Carolina. New York's been very, very good this season. I think over an 82-game schedule, I think they would have made it. So that's the thing, is that you can't look at where teams are in the standings right now and say, well, we'll just cut it off there then. I think the Rangers would have made it over a full 82-game schedule. Now, Florida against the Islanders, I thought Florida was fading and probably wasn't going to make it. So I would say Pittsburgh, probably the Rangers. I still think the Rangers will beat Carolina in that series. And then the Islanders knocking off Florida, I would think should happen. Now, Toronto against Columbus, Toronto's in trouble. Because Columbus, if they're healthy, if they get Seth Jones back, I really think Toronto is going to find themselves on the outside looking in when it comes to the final 16. Now, in the West, you got St. Louis, Colorado, Vegas, and Dallas sitting out, same as Boston, Tampa, Washington, and Philly. But we have no way of knowing how these seedings are actually going to end up and what the NHL is actually going to do. I know whatever happens, if Montreal wins their round, somehow they'll play Boston. That's my guess. Now, the Islanders, they're over here. The other orange and blue team is here. That's the Oilers and the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks do scare me, but I don't think they can knock off the Oilers. A healthy and rested Oilers with McDavid and Draisaitl. I don't see how the Hawks counter that. The Nashville Predators against Arizona. I don't think Arizona can outscore their problems. So, because of a lack of offense and because of Nashville's rest and experience and the realization that this is probably going to be the last chance for Pekka Rinne as a starter, unless Saros is the starter coming out of this, I like Nashville's chances. Vancouver, Minnesota, that's kind of a pick-em to me. How healthy is Markstrom going to be? How well is Vancouver going to play in front of him? How well can Minnesota play? Can Stalock manage to equal the work of Markstrom? Is Stalock going to be the starter? Is Dubnyk going to play? Because there's certainly been a lot of speculation about some players that might sit out, and it's felt like Dubnyk might be one of those ones that goes, forget it, I'm not going to play. And how does that affect things? And then you've got Calgary and Winnipeg. I like Winnipeg's chances in that. So outside of that, though, we just don't know. So I mean, for me, if I'm speculating a final 16, yeah, I guess Vancouver. And so the only upset I would be taking in the West would be Winnipeg. And so you'd have 3 Canadian teams here and then playing whoever up here. I just moved them up. I don't care. I don't think Montreal can beat Pittsburgh, even with Carey Price playing on top at the top of his game. I do think the Rangers can knock out Carolina. I do like the Islanders' chances, and I got to be honest, I like Columbus's chances as well. But again, we just don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do and how this is all going to work. So keep in mind when you're seeing speculations, I've already seen brackets. I saw brackets, and I'm like, we don't know that's what's going to happen. So all those brackets we might have to tear up and throw away. Now, we got practice for that last year with the bracket challenge that was busted in round 1. So many brackets were busted last year in round 1 that the NHL said, okay, do-over, and gave everybody a chance for a do-over after the first round was done, because almost every first round matchup didn't turn out the way that people thought it would. So almost every bracket was busted. And I don't see any reason to think this year won't be different. Because I mean, you look at the 8 teams in the East and just coming up with reasons why I could see them winning. Boston, well, they were the best team during the regular season. I could see them winning a cup. Tampa Bay, they've been knocking on the door for about half a decade. Washington, they won it in 2018. Philadelphia, one of the hottest teams as we went into the break. If they can tap into that again, absolutely, they can win one. Pittsburgh, I never rule out Pittsburgh. I don't. I find it's a bad idea. Rangers, it's a little more of a challenge for me to see the Rangers winning all of it, but, Shesterkin proved he can be hot for a while. Who knows? Islanders, you got Barry Trotz behind the bench. Don't rule anything out. Columbus, one of the ultimate underdogs. Sure. And then out west, you got St. Louis, the defending Stanley Cup champions. Colorado, they were my pick to go to the Stanley Cup Finals this year. They're still my pick to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Vegas has been the favorite during most of the season to win the Stanley Cup. When you look at the betting odds, they've been basically the favorite. Dallas, well, if Dallas can find goals, we know their defense and their goaltending is solid enough. Edmonton, hey, Connor McDavid, sure. If you're going to look at a team in the West that might end the drought for Canada, sure, why not Edmonton? Nashville, again, Nashville went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2017. They're still a pretty good team, and if this rest helps them and helps Rene, why not? Vancouver, they're going to need a lot of help. And I mean they're going to need a lot of help in that they've got Pettersson, they've got Hughes, Besser, they've got Horvat. They got a lot of good young players in there, but they're going to need some depth to come in there, and they're going to need that blue line to really coalesce and really start to play better. But Markstrom's capable of going on a run, so I would not rule out Vancouver in a round of 16 matchup. I would not rule them out at all. I think no matter who they would face of these top 4 teams, I think they'd have a good chance. The only one that I think Vancouver would have a real rough time with would probably be Colorado. St. Louis, I think they could take St. Louis to 7. Vegas, they can absolutely take Vegas to 7, and Dallas. If Vancouver and Dallas were meeting in the round of 16, I think Vancouver would win that. And then over here, Winnipeg. Winnipeg wasn't even supposed to be a playoff team this year, what with losing defensemen and with Byfuglien being gone and all of that. And no, they traded Trouba and they got back Pionk. Well, they're not going to be any good. And here they are. They're in the mix. So I wouldn't rule out Winnipeg, who have arguably the Vezina winning goaltender with Hellebuck. Let me know your thoughts. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, this is just very, very, very preliminary. We really don't have any idea. Again, for the players to be back on the ice and skating is one thing, but for the players to actually be playing games, there's about a million hurdles to go between now and then, but I'll be here to report on them when those hurdles are either cleared or they trip over one, and then we're looking at next season. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Very near 140,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all the help along the way. I will talk to you again soon.